All right, thank you everyone for staying with us on Global Morning. Like we mentioned at the top of the program this morning, it will appear, arguably, that one of the biggest conversations in Nigeria as of today, at least after the price of petrol, it's probably the issues around the hike in telecom service tariff. Of course, it's been a while coming, but today that conversation has assumed a drastic dimension in such a way that you now have a cluster, so to speak, of Nigerians saying that, look, this is one hardship too many because we're already dealing with a lot economically. We have to, pay more for food, we have to pay more for rent, we have to pay more for transportation, we have to pay more for this and pay more for that. Just to mention too that schools resumed just a few weeks ago, and we have parents who have not been able to send their children or some of their children back to school for obvious reason. Of course, they don't have the means to do that, at least just yet. So that's one of the several implications of this hardship. So for many of these Nigerians, their argument is you're only adding one extra layer to their economic troubles if you say you're doing an upward review of telecoms tariff. But again, how realistic is that, especially when you look at it against the position of the service providers themselves, who are now saying that it also bites hard on them. At least it has adverse implications for their operations. They now have to pay more to buy diesel, to buy fuel. Of course, they have to also do upward review of salaries, given that their workers live in the same country, they go to the same market. So it's more like the rain, for want of better words, because it rains on everybody, regardless of your class in society. On the other hand, the regulator, the Nigerian National the Nigerian Communications Commission, I should say, the NCC, is now saying that why don't we meet midway? Let's make it a win-win for everybody. How is it? Is it not possible that on the one hand, the operators themselves, the service providers, can find a bit of, if you like, respite, just so they can keep their businesses running and continue to provide those services that are critical to both individuals and at enterprise level? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, can we not also make consumers happy or a bit satisfied by ensuring that we minimize the burden that this tariff hike will put on them? But that's a bit of a tall order, because it's going to take the whole night to convince the everyday Nigerian that any amount of hike is an ideal thing to be done in light of the economic realities we're now dealing with. This morning we are joined by someone who is not just an expert in the field of information and communications technology. He is also ICT consultant to Abuja and Jos electricity distribution companies. Dauda Moisoro Fika, I should say, who has been here on a couple of occasions, but today we are focusing all the way on the telecom sectors and the issues around this tariff hike. First, we'll say Happy New Year to you, and we're doing well. I will say, we also say we are grateful for your time.
Thank you.
With us on the program. Hopefully, I got the introduction right.
Yes.
Great. But let's start from this point. GSM services, as we would normally call them, have been here for a little over 2 decades.
True.
And Nigerians have never been more grateful, because they have come to realize how much of blessing, so to speak, this has been to them, whether it's at individual level or for businesses. However, in light of the realities we're now dealing with, there are palpable concerns around how they have to pay more now for texting, for calling, and for using the internet. You are a critical stakeholder, for example. What exactly are we dealing with here?
Well, if I follow the argument from the perspective of the regulator, the regulator is saying that there is a need to sustain the industry. So in order for the industry to remain viable, they need to raise a little bit of their revenue so that they can operate without losses. I understand that aspect. But there is an aspect that the regulator has failed repeatedly, which is the protection of the consumer. Because you and I know that if MTN is losing money in 2023, for the last 20 years or 2 decades, MTN has been making money by exploitation, drop calls, abnormal charges, unconnected calls charges, charges on data that does not reflect what you're using. There are many things that the industry has been making money continuously without the regulator saying, wait a minute, you are abusing the right of collections because you are taking too much money for services you are not providing. So that aspect needs to be part of this consideration. If we want to raise tariffs today, what have we done to protect the consumer? Are we giving him better service? Or are we giving him better equipment? Or are we giving him better technology? Or are we giving him, better customer, interactions? We are not doing any of that in the industry. The industry is actually opaque. We don't know what they're doing. We only, use the call at our own expense and at our own payroll. If it works, fine. If it doesn't work, we have nowhere to go and complain. And there is no reason for now the government to say we are coming to raise their tariffs. And they have a history. The government has a history. They have raised tariffs on electricity. And we can look at that as a model. What happened? Are we getting better electricity today? So if you raise tariffs on telecoms, nothing will change. Only they will collect more money. But the service that we depend on will not improve. So the government needs to go back and ask themselves, are we doing it only when the industry says we need help, they will jump and react. But when the consumer says, I need help, nobody is listening. And I think there is a disconnect in that area. So the tariff increase, necessarily maybe the timing is bad, and actually the amount also is unreasonable, in my view. But at some points, there has to be an agreement. What do we need and how much do we need and what can the Nigerian afford and how much can he pay? These are considerations that have been lost in this discussion.
You just talked about disconnect, and that is the crux of our conversation this morning. In any case, there are also those who will argue contrary to your position now and say that, we need to step on our brakes for a second and cut the service providers some slack, because let's say they're operating in a country where you can't guarantee electricity, you can't guarantee power. These guys have to scratch their skin to be able to generate power, to be able to pay for that power. For example, you mentioned MTN a while ago. Now, we can't pretend about that because they are on the front line when it comes to service provision.
Exactly.
In 2010, for example, MTN in particular had posted about 600 million be the cost of powering, cost of energy at that time. This was 1.5 decades ago. 15 years down the line, we can only imagine how much that would have increased already. So how do we strike a balance? You are talking about consumer protection, which is fundamental.
Yes.
But how about ensuring that, to use your word, these companies continue to stay viable?
Yes. The only way to do it is for the regulator who has been maybe asleep at the
NCC.
Yes. Because if they have managed the market as they should have, by now we would have arrived at a reasonable growth and increases in terms of tariffs. They always stay quiet and unengaged most of the time until there is a critical, turning point. This is a critical turning point because we've just illustrated how expensive it is for everybody to operate. It's not just MTN.
Yeah.
It's not just
the telecom sector.
The telecom sector. It's all of us. You and I, it is more expensive for you and I to run my own household and your own household than it was 2 years ago. So if the government is going to react to raising anything, let them be conscious of the fact that everybody has to be growing at the same rate. If one person is growing faster than you and I, then there is going to be a conflict in terms of outrage from the general public. They will say, okay, fine, I understand that you have to make more money, but I'm not making any more money. So how do I pay you? So this is where the things has to be in a way where we look at it before the fact. If we gradually keep raising because we know that things will be expensive, or if we say to ourselves the energy cost at one point, the number one issue is subsidy. If we remove subsidy from everything, which is the path this government is taking, then there is going to be this problem. And there's no explanation to it because it's our own action.
Right.
We remove the subsidy. If the subsidy is there, we can tell the telcos, okay, we are helping you already. So what is your excuse now? We did that to the electric companies. We did that to other industries. And they survived. Now that the government is unable to maintain that freebie, They said, okay, let the general public pay for it. We agree, but let's do it in stages. Shouldn't be just, fuel is going up by 500%. 50% on net telecoms is nothing if you look at it realistically. But Nigerians are adding everything together. And the reality is that it's becoming too much. That's the only, but I agree that, the telecoms needs to make enough money to survive, not just to carry profits home, but just to provide the service itself. And if they can't provide the service, then you and I will also still suffer. So both sides of the coin has a good argument. But the outrage now is the way it is being done and how much of it is being done at this hour. If they take 10% or 15%, most people will not feel it. Give us another 6 months and do it again. Then, we are gaining as we go. But if you say 50 and 100% at a time, is drastic. And people are realizing that, hey, the call that I used to make for 20 minutes now, I can only do 10 or 12. So that is a big change in how. And the government has done something else. It has told Nigerians, you can't go to the bank and withdraw money because you can do everything online. If I go to the bank, they say, how much? Oh, it's only 5,000 at the ATM. Inside is only, there is a limit to everything I can do because I've been told to go and do it online. Now you're making the online transactions more expensive.
Right.
So there is somewhere that even a 2-year-old will look at this logic and say, what is wrong with it? Because you're not paying attention to what you're doing in terms of how you are migrating people from one regiment to the next one. And all you're doing is forcing people to go back. Because now they will avoid the online, and now they will go and troop into the bank and force the bank to give them their money.
That's
and
right.
This is not the objective of the government.
Is it valid an argument to say that, some people have argued too that one of the challenges we have in the telecom sector is that the bulk of the operators are non-indigenous. Is that a factor really?
Very big one. Somebody gave me an example. He said, beside not being indigenous, even the bulk of the industry, equipment, infrastructure are non-indigenous. We only manufacture about 16% of the telecoms equipment and infrastructure. We buy everything. And when we buy everything, we're buying in dollars. And now you know what dollars is doing to
The naira, right.
So everywhere you look, we have not really looked at how do we mitigate this problem. Them being non-indigenous also means that they have to take the money from Nigeria and go and pay somebody somewhere. And that value of the naira is also...
Again, capital flight.
Thank you. So these are the things that we have built into the system. That is now a negative for all of us. Because it doesn't help us. If we have indigenous companies, they almost always, grovel and crawl and then they fall and then they go out of existence. It's the foreign ones that manage to continuously, good or bad, they still stay and they maintain their viability. But that aspect is also a critical one. And part of the regulator is to see that our indigenous companies are brought into the sector by policies and by regulations that say, if you do this, bring a Nigerian. If you do that, bring a company. If you do this, buy from this person. If you manufacture in this location. This is how regulation is going to help us. But we can't be just regulating it. Just how much do you make last year? Okay, let me give you more money. No. We can't do that.
You see, there are people who have said that, in fact, they have had to put the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Council, the FCCPC, in the sport again on account of this telecoms tariff hike issue. They are saying that while we can, lambast the NCC the entire day, we also need to turn our attention for a minute to the FCCPC, that they should be the one whose mandate essentially is to protect the consumer, regardless of the sector.
Exactly.
Is that commission doing its part?
Well, the FCCPC came out in support of this tariff increase. And their logic is economic. If we do not sustain the industry, if it fails, all of us will pay a price. So it is good for all Nigerians to make sure that the industry is viable. So the FCCPC is saying, yes, we are here to protect the consumer, but it is important that we allow the industry to survive. So maybe now the FCC needs to come back and tell us, okay, if we raise these tariffs, these are the things that we are going to expect from the telecom industry. and let's get a list of improvements that the telecom industry needs to make. So that the FCCPC is saying, okay, we cannot, keep you in a losing venture, but we are going to make sure that as long as you are making money, Nigerians are also gaining a benefit. What are the benefits? No drop calls, reliability in connections, reliability in access for those that have very, small devices or poor devices, and also, reliability in the service itself that we get. I also have to digress here and say one other thing. The industry has made it a defining aspect of their operation that everything is wireless. This is where the FCCPC needs to come in. Okay, let's wire as many homes or as many businesses or as many agencies as possible, because the reliability that Nigerians are looking for will never exist on a wireless network. There is no way you can say a wireless network will be enough to give reliability better than a wired network. This copper wire needs to run from point A to point B, and as long as we are connected, we will have no problem. And
so we don't have that infrastructure just yet?
We don't. There is a little bit of fiber trunking that is going across towns and across states. That's there because the companies have realized that they are unable to maintain the microwave connections, which is, but there needs to be, if you go outside Nigeria, most places, they have wired their, networks. The wireless is the last mile, which is in your hand.
Right.
Because you don't want a wire dragging behind you. But everything else should be wired. Nigerians, we have not focused on that aspect at all.
What are we afraid of? Is it because it's capital intensive?
Very, very capital intensive. And since the industry is saying we need money to invest, then the regulator needs to direct what type of investment. They should tell them, we need you to invest, but we want you to invest in wired networks because we know this will provide reliability. And we also know that it doesn't matter who is providing the service, either MTN or Glo or whoever, that network belongs to the entire nation because nobody can come and say, I'm going to remove your service, so let me pull my wire. It doesn't work that way. You can just cut me off, but my wire still remains. And that is very critical in terms of the network that we are going to sustain and provide reliability on it. Without a wired, component, the service is always going to be dependent on the peculiarities of the wireless, system. So that's part of the regulator's duty, and they have not been doing it.
Isn't it worrisome, or at least say curious, to know that this entire time the NCC seems to be more, if you like, obsessed with the need to have some measure of tariff hike approved, in favor of the operators, as against having real-time conversation around quality of service, for example, and things like that. That has now further raised issues around the effectiveness or otherwise of regulation in Nigeria, even when you look at pay TV, for example.
And that's very accurate because we do not look at how do we, as a regulator, engage the market. We only look at how do we, as a regulator, determine the activities of the operator. The activities of the operator are very simple. He is here, he claims to provide a service and he charges a fee. Then the regulator says, okay, this fee is all right for now. And then after a period of time, they will say, okay, you can raise this much. And then but there is no component in our regulation that says, okay, quality of service is the determining factor for raising rates. If you want to raise rates, we agree. Fantastic. Show us that your drop calls have gone from 200 to 100. Show us that your connection and access charges have remained stable, but your service has improved. Show us that your infrastructure, your investment have grown in areas that were absent before. If you do that, then the regulator can say, okay, you're making an effort to provide better, then we have a reason to give you to collect a little bit more. And this is the way that it should have been. But for now, I don't think that's the path that the regulators have taken. They will claim all the actions of the regulator as if they are doing it to save the industry. But what about do it to save the customer? What about do it to improve the service and all that? So that doesn't exist. I don't know how they will go ahead and say, okay, we have enough provision of service, but we don't have enough money to pay for it. It doesn't work that way. If you provide a service, Nigerians are paying for the service. So why not, find a way to at least bring it to a point where the improvements are regular, measurable, and continuous. It's just stagnant. For the network, it's very stagnant. So I don't know how they will explain it to Nigerians now that they have raised these rates.
We're going to take a break real soon, but let's talk about this issue of competitiveness. I mean, when you, as an expert, look at the industry today, would you say it's substantially competitive, or we still have a long way to go on that front?
It is in terms of the providers, because, one provider knows that if I raise my rates and the other provider is also in the market and he doesn't do the same, my customers will migrate. So that's where the competition exists. Who can keep the highest number of customers? But there is no competition in service. There is no competition in infrastructure. There is no competition in development. You can live close to it, wireless base station, which is a tower. You still have the worst service possible.
Ironically.
So I don't know what is the competition, because it doesn't relate at all. So it's just, we have no idea what they are doing, what is the basis of their services, how do they measure, do they even have, like if there's an audit system that the government can do on these companies, go in and audit, one provider and say, this provider is doing A, B, C, and D. And then go to the next one. How come you're not doing A? You're only doing C. This is where the consumer now is engaged. He can see it and say, okay, this guy is doing this guy is not doing this. And that's where the competition will even be higher. But we don't do that at all. We just sit and wait.
All right, well, we need to take a quick break now, everyone. When we return, we're going to look at a little more than just the competition and other components in this conversation. We'll now turn to some of the reactions that we have seen the last few days to this issue around 50% tariff hike on telecom services that Nigerians enjoy. The rest of the program continues shortly. To stay with us. Global Morning is your top morning show here on Global Television.
We bring you fresh news updates daily while delving into a variety of current affairs and topics.
And at the same time, keeping you well informed about important events, both national and internationals.
Global Morning serves as a valuable source of information, helping viewers like you start your day well informed.
Stay connected from Mondays to Sundays to a wide range of the latest news making rounds on Global Morning.
We're on the road to protest.
The president meets all of our demands.
This is Global Morning.
All right, now time to bring you the second lap of this conversation this morning. So I was going to ask you just before the break about the reactions now coming through, of course, on account of these developments. The Nigerian Labour Congress is going to take to the streets. As a matter of fact, it would mobilize citizens and, of course, consumers to clearly state their position on this matter. Isn't that flogging a dead horse?
Absolutely, because we can't, well, in my view, I do not argue with the arguments of the Congress, the NLC and the NANS and others, but we can't protest at the operators' premises telling them that they should not raise it. They are not the ones actually. They have been begging for years to raise the rates. We need to convince our reps and our leaders that this type of decisions are ill-timed. So if the Labour Congress wants to protest, yes, they can, but on the basis of the fact that the timing or maybe the gravity of the increase is maybe not sensitive to the existing or prevailing economic conditions. That's where they will come in and now begin a discussion, and with the necessary government as well as the operator to see where is the middle ground for Nigerians. It is not going to be possible to remain at zero for the telecoms industry. MTN has said they lost 514 billion in 2023. So it's a substantial, loss in terms of business operator. No one can survive that type of loss for a few years. So that has to be a big consideration for the government. As far as the consumer is concerned, the consideration is the degree of service and the quality of service, and that needs to improve, because if it improves, then some of the money I waste on the bad service I would now come back to me, because now it's being utilized properly. So I may not spend as much, even though the rate has gone up. But if there is no commensurate improvement in the service, then I'll even spend more, even though the rate has gone up, and I'm not receiving, a reciprocal increase in the quality or the delivery of service. So I will support a conversation that looks at it again. But to fight over the increase will just be, semantics and photo opportunities. Nothing will bring a better. Nigerians are suffering. The amount of hardships that we listed earlier still remain. So that will not, remove the hardship itself. So let's work something where there is a return in the investment we're making in this tariff hike, so that we can see something better from the companies.
A few years ago, MTN got listed on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and many experts, economists, and telecoms pundits like yourself did say it was a step in the right direction. And there was also the projection that there was a pretty good chance that in the next few years from that point, the other operators were likely going to follow that same path. Of course, that hasn't happened just yet. Ideally, should that be the practice, that all these big names in the sector go public?
It should, because you can see how the one company that is public has maintained their strengths.
Even market share.
Exactly. And that is because the idea is not from a select group. The idea is coming from all the shareholders, all the stakeholders. So that is how a company or a corporation actually survives the goods and the bads, the ups and downs. If it is only, owned or controlled or managed by just a few, the idea that they will be able to do everything is limited. And that's why I think the idea of going public is for all to at least emulate and see if they can allow Nigerians. Ownership is something that also makes Nigerians now feel like, okay, it is my company. So even if they raise rates, I'm also a beneficiary. So that is part of it. But to say that, we want to be indigenous without ownership by all Nigerians is just giving it to rent seekers. And, that's our problem number two. That everybody wants to buy something and sell it tomorrow and make more money. With the productivity of the expert is not, in existence. We don't produce anything, we don't build anything, we don't manufacture. We just want to buy it and, sell it again, or give it or provide the service just to make more money. And that in itself is a negative for all of us. we need to be able to be productive. And that corporation that is public will have a lot of ideas that will guide it and run it. So those that are public, we can see they're doing very well. Even with losses, MTN is still doing
They're still resilient.
Yes, so and that's part of the reason why.
At this point, would you say it's timely or ill-timed should be to say the NCC should give out more licenses to maybe small players?
Well, I will give you an example. The NCC has not been so robust in inviting market players. If you and I decide that we want to, begin a small operation in telecoms, the NCC will just deny, because they expect you to come with a lot of money. And if you have to come with a lot of money in Nigeria, there's only two ways you can come with a lot of money in Nigeria. Either you're in the oil industry or you're in an office that pays you monies that we don't know about.
And that has to be political.
Thank you. So these are the only channels that you can have to have a license from the NCC, and that's bad. That's bad. We need to go to our banks and take out money and invest and build businesses. That doesn't work because the NCC will not allow you. I have not seen anyone that has gone as an investor from a commercial aspect and get a license. It's always either political or it's always either some sort of magnets that come and collect licenses, and that denies most Nigerians the opportunity. And some of us will have better ideas than these ones that are in existence today, but we have closed the market. So it doesn't help Nigeria, it doesn't help consumers, it doesn't help the sector. So I think that's also a consideration. Yes, they need to issue more licenses. I know of an incident here in Abuja where a group comes and says, okay, we would like to wire Abuja with fiber.
That was a proposition?
Yes, a proposition, and they have not been given that right to do it.
Could that be a problem of bureaucracy?
Well, it's part of it, but they have not been able to gain that licensing. And we have said that we need to do fintech, we need to do this, we need to do that. But when the market is closed, how do you get in? You don't need a lot of money to start. But for Nigeria, it is a must. You must have a lot of money to start. And that closes the market for all. So I hope NCC will look at their procedures and bureaucracy and say, okay, let's give, if you fail, it's fine, we'll withdraw a license. But if you come looking and you have a proposal and a business plan and you have, a good, market that is willing to pay for that, let that trial go out. It's like a test pilot. Let them try. One person will fail, another one will copy that idea and build it, and it will succeed. But we do not allow newcomers easily, and that's a negative for us.
There are people who believe that one of the reactions in the days, weeks, and months ahead that we are going to see to this tariff hike factor is a preponderance, or if you like, a litany of lawsuits. In fact, people have even talked about the possibility of class action in this regard. I know you're not a lawyer, for example, but to what extent would that go?
My question would be, who are you going to sue?
Maybe the NCC, being first respondent, and the operators themselves following.
If you sue the NCC, is the law that you're going to fight, right? Because the law that made NCC what it is what you're going to be fighting.
That's their own acts now.
Yes, because otherwise, who are you going to sue? MTN did not raise rates independent of the government.
Right.
So you can't sue MTN and say, why did you do it? They already been making their case for years before they got this rate. So it's the government that you're going to sue. And are we successful in suing governments in Nigeria?
I think that question should be a PhD thesis topic in itself. But let's wrap it up now. Let's talk about modalities for driving this tariff hike of 50%. People are saying, look, we are not clear as to how the NCC and the operators are going to make this happen. In fact, we're even told the operators themselves are still waiting in limbo for the NCC to provide clarity as to how the implementation will go. What are your thoughts along those lines?
I think what needs to happen in that instance is that when these rates go in, there needs to be an exceedingly high level of transparency. How much is it per call? How much is it per GB? How much is it for all the services that you're providing? And do not use languages or deceit in telling me buy this, and then after I buy it I realize that it's not exactly what I want because the language has been confusing. Let them be transparent and clear in what they want to sell and how much it is going to cost, and let Nigerians know it upfront, and then periodically also give us an assessment of, okay, the company is now providing this service at this rate, and this is how much improvement we have built into it because of this rate. And I think that's the only way. But without us knowing the level of, the service and the cost of the service, there is no way to determine it. You just keep paying, and you're lucky if you get it, and there is no way to go. I have never seen a day where I have said, this call that I made, I have spent 20 naira and I did not speak to anyone on the other end of the line and get my 20 naira back. Just as small as that. You have never seen a refund from any company. And there is no company that doesn't make mistakes in charges. But they are
everywhere around the world.
Everywhere around. And there is never a refund from the telecom industry. Why? So there has to be, transparency. They are opaque. They do what they want and they get away with it. And it's the fault of the NCC. So if you want to sue, maybe go in the line of services that you have paid for but now received.
You didn't get value for.
Thank you. And then you can sue for that because now you have a legitimate, fight. But just to say don't wait the rate, I don't think that will help us.
All right, there's a lot to talk about these issues, quite frankly, but Nigerians will continue to make their position clear as to how they feel regarding these developments, which obviously has not come to closure just yet. Fingers are crossed, waiting to see what as they say, most of the cases, the white paper will be in this direction. I've been talking with Habu Dauda, the Moisero of FICA. He's an ICT consultant to Abuja and Jos distribution companies, helping us to shed light and find insights and perspectives in this all-important conversation. Once again, we say we're grateful for your time and insights.
So we are happy to be here.
Great. So we'll take a quick break shortly. Queen Agaba and I will return, and we'll talk you through till just before it's top of the hour when we bring you Talk Sports. Do stay with us. Okay, let's get going on the program, everyone. We're moving away a little from issues that are, well, essentially economic and political, human angle discussions too, because whether you like it or not, there won't be politics, there won't be economics without human beings. That also has to do with whether they live or they survive, I mean, whether they survive or they don't. It also has to do with their livelihood, their sustenance, and of course their mental health, very important. Sadly, we live in a country where we have not yet imbibed the culture of paying as much attention to mental health as we do to other aspects of our well-being. I mean, the other time my colleague and I here were just joking about how that, I mean, imagine you wake up one morning and you call up your boss and say, well, good morning, sir, or good morning, ma. I'm not so sure I can make it to work today. I'm having some very serious mental health concerns. Would you allow me take the day off, report for work tomorrow? I mean, people don't see that as calling in sick around here until you have malaria, you have, I mean, it has to be 2 pluses, as they say. It has to be typhoid, has to be some kind of serious ailments. Sometimes you even have to take a picture of you lying in a hospital bed, drip and all of that, maybe one leg hung somewhere. We have to see that level of seriousness to know that is actually indeed something concerning. But what happens to mental health, where people's self-esteem, people's mental well-being is not getting as much attention as is needed? Just a while ago, behind the camera, Queen Agaba and I were talking about a certain video that made the rounds. Of course, there are 2 videos now because we understand there's a follow-up to the first one, of a woman who allegedly had been beaten black and blue by her husband. Yes, I said her husband. All right, and that's garnered a lot of reactions from people. Of course, as expected, women, everybody reacted to it, even men who understand how that, as a man, you have a responsibility to protect a woman, whether she's your mom, your girlfriend, your wife, or your sister, even your female colleagues and neighbors and all of that. But this wasn't the case, and there was a lot of sympathy and empathy going out for this woman. But fast forward to a few days or so down the line, she comes out again and she's singing a different song. Queen is very good at singing her song, and she will do you a version of it on the program this morning.
Definitely not a song I was but I mean, I think it's pathetic
right,
that you come out, because she came out as Will by herself. You know, she was raising her voice and saying, see what her husband did to her for going to school to pick up her children. You could tell, you could feel the pain in her voice, you know, that for wearing singlets, you know, not revealing though, but just an armless shirt, to go pick up her kids in school. She was battered. I mean, she was beaten like she had killed somebody or stolen. You would think that, you know how they beat thieves on the street. I don't think they beat thieves as much as he did to her in that video. She was beaten, her face swollen, she had blood clots and all of that, and then she was making that video and, you know, wailing about how she was beaten just because of her appearance to the school. Regardless of what she wore to the school, to go and pick up that her children, first of all, I don't think that should even extend as much as raising your hand on her. The issue, on no account, I would say on no account should a husband raise his hand to beat his wife. And they had, you know, little children that were in primary school. So what example was he setting for the children? What does he want the children to look at him as? You know, all of those scenarios. But that aside, the part where he gets very painful and very gets me wondering is the fact that she comes out later, you know, amidst because obviously her call for help, her call for people to look at the situation she has found herself in, it triggered people, civil society organizations, NGOs, women, advocates, even men. A lot of people came out and were talking about it. Another case of domestic violence that we don't want to see or don't like to hear. And this time around, he has beaten her and battered her, basically. And so people got interested in the conversation in that issue. And that must have also triggered the man, or, you know, made the man feel restless and all of that. And since the woman happens to be in his custody as his wife, I don't know what must have transpired, but that is a classic case of an abusive relationship, because you could tell the signs. This woman comes back a day or two later, reading a script that was obviously doctored, and, you know, she probably must have been, because we could hear a voice behind also telling her, you know, what to say, while she was reading that script, saying that they don't want any further interferences from media, from bloggers, from private organizations, individuals and NGOs, that she's fine, and she takes full blame for the beating that she received, for the beating she has received from her husband, and that they're in a loving relationship and they have settled, and this is not something he does all the time, yada yada yada, those kind of statements. And if we watch that video, I think we'll play that video now. If you see that video, if you listen to that video, you would look at, she was jittering, she was not herself, she was under duress. It was most likely a case of duress. I just want us to see that video for a few seconds,
right,
and continue the conversation.
Has deflected drastically for less than what you saw in the initial video. And finally, I thank everyone who actually showed concern and interest and well-being of women, and for me also. I actually thank everyone for the good deed and your comment and everything. I must testify that I have not regretted marrying my husband, Mr. Levinus. And he has not, he never wanted to harm me. And I also don't want any harm.
Well, you have it for yourself. You could tell it was obvious that she was reading a script. I want to get your perspective too, from the angle of a man, because do you think that it's, to an extent, I know that you definitely say that it's not justifiable and all of that, but what can be done? What do you think should be done to these kinds of men, or how do we begin to, where have we missed it? Could it be that he didn't also have a father figure, to have, who were his role models for him to have I'm struggling to get the right kind of question to ask as regards this situation, because it's sickening. And believe me, there are many other situations like this, many other people who are in abusive relationships like this. This is just one of the many or hundreds of cases that gets to the media, and then we see that the captives go back to their abusers and are unwilling to let go. Behind the camera, we talked about it, called Stockholm syndrome, where these captives are even more in love with their abusers after certain episodes of abuses and all of that.
I need to be honest with myself and everyone watching right now. I feel dazed because it's concerning how she did that, that U-turn, as I'd like to call it. First, she's reading the scripts. Obviously, as we say in broadcasting, she's being teleguided. All right, so that in itself is very concerning. As to that, the fact that she's still carrying a sport, I'd like to call it, yes, particularly on the right eye, while reading, I should say struggling to read. And side by side, you have a picture of her and the man whom I suppose is her husband. She says she has no regrets whatsoever being married to Mr. Levinus. Bloggers and broadcasters like Queen Agaba should stay off. They should stay clear, right? But again, yes. The only reason we're able to discuss it, quite frankly, is that there's no court injunction to that effect right now. If the lady had secured a court order to say, look, bloggers, all you online in-laws and commentators, broadcasters, whatsoever, should stop talking about this issue, of course, we won't even be here venturing into the conversation this morning. But beyond this instant case, one thing is concerning. The question is, how many more women, or in some cases, maybe even men, are in similar relationships, whether they are just dating or they are having a casual relationship, or worse still, they are married? Because this is an extreme case, as we can see, of living in denial. Because you can live in denial all you want, but in the end, it doesn't change a thing about the consequences of that thing over which you're living in denial. Now, we're asking ourselves, does she have relatives? Does she have people who care about her, whether they are just her friends or people who share faith, for example? Is important. You're also asking, what is the origin of that script or whatever source she was reading from? Whose idea was it? Who put it together? Who was teleguiding her? How much of work went into her buying into this idea of coming back to the public to say something that's totally different from what she had said earlier on? how much of trauma is she dealing with already as it stands? How much more will she have to grapple with? Does she have children? How does this situation impact them? The questions probably never end.
It never ends, and it's really sad because it shows that she was under duress, and that there's always going to be a repeat.
Right.
Because people, in fact, people had foreseen this sort of circumstance from the comment section when she came out earlier. The short time she came out, when she came out to talk about, you know, how she was beaten, and then somebody said, "We're tired of handling situations like this. After now, you go and settle with your husband, and you will not leave
And make us the bad people."
Marriage, yes, and make us the bad people. And before we knew it, I think it was the following day, she came out with another message saying that people should not interfere in this kind of situation. But I think that from all indices that she's in an abusive relationship, and I don't think that statement she made was, you know, strong enough or should be strong enough to deter relevant organizations from helping her or from, you know, probing further or doing further investigations just to ascertain, or from even giving a court order to that man never to lay hands on his hands on her again, so that the cases of abuse can be minimal. But the thing is, after all is said and done, we leave these people together, and then the reconditioning continues, because abuse is beyond physical. I think it's beyond physical. It's beyond, you know, talking to this person. It has to do with a whole lot of rewiring of the victim's mind. There's a whole lot of rewiring, there's a whole lot of manipulation, conditioning, and all that. And that's why it's usually difficult for these people to leave. But when they cry out, and some of them will rather die in those abusive marriages than leave those marriages. But I'm looking at how people can help these people, because when people don't give you access to their lives, there's little or nothing you can do to help them. Particularly in cases where they tell you, don't interfere, take your hands off, and which is usually determined by the abusers, you know, and then the message is passed through the victim, but you know that the abuser is, you know, solidly behind such messages. How can we extend help to these sort of people? How can we, because, and again, if we say we want to organize maybe classes, meetings, seminars to help, you know, women understand better, women who are in abusive relationship, the sad thing is they go back to these men who continue the conditioning, the reconditioning, and all of that, and then, you know, you find out that it's very difficult for these women to leave. But if you ask me, in my opinion, I think that once a woman cries out once with viable evidence of an abuse, the man should be apprehended.
At least for investigation. For
investigation. And, you know, maybe he should be given some sort of punishment. And, you know,
if the allegations are established.
If they are established. Take, for instance, this woman's case, where the only reason, because the man has not come out to debunk the fact that he didn't beat his wife. He has not come out to say that he didn't beat her because of sin.
At least we don't have that evidence that he came out.
We don't have that evidence. He has not come out to say anything, you know, negating what she said, what she has said. But she has come out with evidence. The first video where she was beaten, she was battered. And it was just a sad scene. And so I think that something should be done. The man should not be left behind the scene. We should even see the face of this man who has beaten this woman like this. We didn't see pictures of the man, nothing as regards this man. No news as to whether or not the man has been apprehended or what they're doing to ensure that, you know, nothing investigation. We just saw that the woman came out again to debunk this news, and she's definitely going to be in that marriage because she has children and she wants to protect it. But there are other sides to this issue. I think what we should establish now is the fact that we need to sensitize young girls, because now what has been done has been done.
Right.
Sad thing is that she's married to an abuser, and he has done a lot of conditioning, manipulations, and all of that might take the grace of God for her to leave that marriage. But what are we looking at now? We should be looking at what happens to the younger girls, you know, so that we don't have this sort of
like a recurrence.
Like a recurrence where we have more people in abusive marriages. Because now it will be difficult to take this lady out unless she makes that decision herself. You can't go out and pull her out of those kind of marriages. So we should organize seminars where we teach girls these signs early. Because what people don't know is that when a man buys you something, when a man does something that you think, because sometimes we feel it, maybe something that is absurd somehow, he raises his voice at you, he holds you, gives you like a firm grip somehow, you know, don't wave that aside. It could be a sign of abuse as well. You know, certain actions, those red flags, and then maybe when you confront him, he tries to gaslight you, or there's, you know, some sort of, you just sense sometimes, you know, it's unexplainable. This abuse, you know in your mind that something is not right, but you cannot explain it. Then you need to take a pause and critically look at this person, do proper research, you know, read about some of these signs, and, you know, the good thing is that we have AI. You can even ask AI. This for young girls. When a person does also, they give you suggestions, and then what you can even.
They may not be altogether accurate, but they can give you an insight.
And then how you can maybe take your time to look for reoccurrences, watch their actions. Now the thing is, I know they say actions speak louder than words. It's almost sounding like a cliche. You know, because the actions say, oh, action speaks louder than words. But the truth is, it is what it is. A person can tell you, I love you, and their actions negate it. So while he's saying I love you, he's buying you gifts, watch out for his actions. Is he ignoring you? Is he dismissive? You raise important questions and he tries to shove it, you know, behind. You know, how does he react when you talk about sensitive topics? How does he talk to you? So that's the thing. I think that's where, you know, we're looking at their words, but we're not paying attention to the actions. There's most likely going to be a problem. I think another thing is, I'm just going to quickly establish it. I wish we had more time. I think that some of the reasons why people cannot live abusive relationship, one of them would be because they're not financially stable. Most women enter into marriages fully dependent on the men, and they're not financially stable, and so they are thinking, what becomes of me if I leave this relationship, you know, and all of that. And another thing would be because they want to remain married, because we've seen quite a number of women who are doing well financially in their career and otherwise, but because they're thinking, if I go out now, who would marry me now? You know, all of those things. And
time is fast spent.
Time is fast spent. And all of that and all of that. And the third thing would be, there are a lot of reasons, but let me just establish this. The third one would be maybe Stockholm syndrome, because you have been rewired, conditioned, and you know, all of that, and you are stuck there and you don't know where to go. And or maybe because you have not developed yourself, you've just built your life around that marriage and around that man. That's why it's essential and important that as a woman, before you get into marriage, find yourself, find what you love to do, and also build healthy relationship around or outside your marriage as well. Have friends, have family. Some people, when they marry, they just close all chapters regarding them.
Me and my man.
Me and my man. And so when anything happens, there's nobody to
You're
run
stranded.
to. You're stranded. And so you are stuck there, and before you know it, it's 2 years, 3 years, you're doing 15 years in abusive relationship, and 20 years, and by the time they realize and leave or want to leave, they are completely you know, a wreck. It's just a sad thing. So I just think that women should do a lot, and then men also have their part to play. Why women need to do a lot? Because they are mostly the victims, so you have to be particular about who you get married to, how you spend your life, and whatever it is you're doing. But the men also, I think that more seminars should be organized for men, and then fathers need to do a whole lot of, you know, we hear women talk about how they train their daughters do this, but we don't see that much attention given to the male children
from their fathers.
Yes. And I think that that's where all of this stems from, because if you have a worthy role model, if you had a father figure who actually loved or cherished your mother, you will replicate same in your own family. And also there was something at the top of my tongue, but I just yes, women who stay in abusive relationship. Now this one is for those women. This is another reason why you need to leave. If you stay in an abusive relationship and you have male children, know that you would also be doing yourself a disservice, because the male children will be looking at their father beat you, and that lifestyle
and replicated.
And so that's why we have abuse in generation,
cross generation.
So you want to do yourself a favor to leave, if not for anything, just so that your children don't take up those characters and replicate it in the lives of other young girls.
You know, children are very apt, I mean, on account of learning from what they see. The best way to teach a child is through pictures, and that's why when you go to kindergarten and Montessori environments, you always see pictures, graphics all over the place. They learn better from graphics than from text and words like adults do. All right, what does that say? What it says is psychology has established that if a young boy grows up in a home where over time his dad abuses his mom, whether it's physical or verbal, there's a substantial chance that he would emulate that as he gets older, because he realizes, well, that's the way to go. I mean, does it not shock you sometimes, really, when you hear a guy say, these women don't listen unless you hit them. These women don't listen unless you hit them. That culture is coming from somewhere. All right, because that's the life he knows. That's the life he knows. Someone said, if you grow up in a ghetto somewhere in the U.S. and you turn out to become a rapper, there's a chance you always sing your rap songs will always be about ghetto life, ghetto life, ghetto life. But if you grow up somewhere in Manhattan where the top investment bankers in the world live, even if you become a rapper, you're always going to sing about opulence, wealth, affluence, even when you don't have it, because that's the life you know. It comes from the inside. It's something you have internalized over time. The point Kunagaba is making is simple. Model for your son as fathers the kind of life you want them to live even beyond you. Because these attributes are always cross-generational, and that responsibility begins today.
Well, very interesting. That responsibility begins today. I like how you put it, for fathers and for mothers as well. Well, on that note, this is where we have to draw the curtains. This is where we draw the curtains on Global Morning. It's been an interesting conversation here on Global Morning. And don't forget to follow us across all social media platforms using @GlobalTVNG and other handles now showing on your screen. Until we see you again, from all of us here at Global Television, have an amazing day ahead. Bye for now.